morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Katlego Mokadi. I'm from a company called FEM. We deal with workmen's compensation in the construction sector. Yes, can we go ahead with the presentation there? Yes, so the main purpose of this is just to inform everyone about FEM and also the benefits of being with FEM, and we'll take you through your claim processes. And I've got a few cases also about workmen's compensation that we'll refer to, but everything will be detailed in the presentation. So what is workmen's compensation? Workmen's compensation is compulsory cover that is commonly known as COID. It is insurance that covers employees while they're injured while performing their daily duties. So workmen's compensation cover is prescribed by the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act of 130 of 1993. So it says that an accident that arises during employment resulting in a person injured or illness or occupational disease contracted in the workplace. And can I just quickly lock this thing here? My apologies for that. All right, there we go. Perfect. Yes, occupational disease contracted in the workplace and fatalities because of an accident that happened on duty and are typically covered by the insurance. Next slide, please. So who is FEM? FEM is an insurer that was established in 1936. It was introduced to workmen's compensation in the Act of 1941, and we were licensed and granted a license to do workmen's compensation in the building and construction sector. Our operational are essentially confined on insurance against liabilities under Section 30 of the Compensation of Occupational Injuries Disease Act of 1993, which is prescribed as COID. So FEM is a representation of about 6,000 companies that are doing workmen's compensation in South Africa. Majority of them are CIDB graded 9 companies. And in the informal sector, we know that there's almost about 1.5 million companies, according to stats, say that are doing construction. Can we move to the next slide, please? So what happens when an employee is injured, or where do they go for treatment? When you are covered by FEM, we utilize private hospitals, and that is mainly to ensure that employees get the best medical care as possible. And this also it helps us with response from private hospitals, mainly so that we can get statements and make payments faster. And also for the employee, the benefit is that they get treatment much faster than they would be at the government hospital. Not saying that the government hospitals are not doing their job, but it's just to say that, they get better service. And we utilize MSO, which are a group of nurses and doctors who ensure that when an employee is injured while on duty, they're not over-serviced, and we do not pay over for services. So for example, I would say if a patient would spend a night in ICU, the cost will be plus minus 30,000 or even more. So we want to ensure that, as an employer, you are not being over-serviced and overcharged. Next slide, please. So in FEM, we have a group of administrators who are situated in Cape Town, Durban. The main purpose of us having administrators is that we want to ensure that we take away the administrative burden from our employers who are signed through with FEM. So they are expert in that field, where immediately once the claim is submitted to FEM, they are the ones who will contact the doctors, follow up with the patient if needs be, and also ensure that, whoever at the company who's submitting the claim may remain in their core function. We take away the administrative burden from their side. Next slide. So what happens when an employee is injured while on duty? So we have 2 forms of claims, which are reportable and recorded claims, and accident that require medical treatment. So if an accident happens while you're on duty, It will be an accident that should be reportable to FEM if they require medical attention. An employer report will be sent through to FEM. That with the employer's ID, the employees who got injured ID copy and supporting documents, which will be your employer's report form. And then the injured employee will then be taken to for treatment. And once an injury is only a recordable incident, the employer's report form must still be filled, and that must be filed with your safety file. If the symptoms manifest after that, you do have record that the claim has been lodged, and then you can take it through once the symptoms have manifested and report it back to FEM. Next slide, please. So how do we process a claim at FEM? So immediately when the accident occurs, you complete our employer's report forms, send them through to our registry department for registration. Once the employer's report is completed, you can send through a copy of the injured employee's report of accident through with them to the hospital, and also first a copy of the ID. And from there, once it's submitted at the hospital, the claim number will be registered with FEM, and we will accept liability. And once liability is accepted, it will be administered by our claim administrators, where it might lead to an employee being injured, leading to a fatality. There will be some pension that will be paid out to the injured employees, dependents, and also where the cases where it's temporary total disablement, which means the employee might not be performing, will be able to perform their duties or their duties. There will be some medical compensation for that, but it's not entirely, because I know in the industry, some people expect that once you get injured, they expect to get some payments. But remember, with those, it's mainly based on the percentage of the injury and also the severity of the injury. Not all claims will result in the employee getting paid a lump sum or pension in that case. So where there is disability, as I said, there will be a monthly pension that will be allocated to the injured employee. And again, according to the percentage, and those are prescribed in the COID Act. We can move to the next slide. So I have a few case studies that I'm going to be presenting also to you today. So these are some of the definitions that you will see me mentioning on those case studies. So your TTD is as defined there as temporary total disablement, which means employee can't perform the duty for that period until he is healed. And LSD will be lump sum that is paid to dependents. CV, it's capitalized value. So capitalized value, we look at the holistic view about the claim. We do calculate pensions and the money that needs to go out to dependents. Hospital costs, obviously, will be costs that are incurred by the hospital. Medical costs will be caused by the doctor. So, example, your GPs, referrals after that, and yes, secondary treatment also. Next slide, please. So this is one of a claim that was submitted through to FEM. So it was an employee who got injured. Unfortunately, this led into a fatality. So on the employee report, there is a section where you would put in as to what happened with the claim. So with this one, when they submitted the claim to FEM, it stated that suspect slipped on top of a car and fell into a shaft. So the gender, it was a male, age around 35, and the experience, he had 8 years experience in that. Occupation, he was a mechanic. Unfortunately, this led into a fatality, and the employee was declared dead on scene. Hospital costs were zero, medical costs were zero, sundries, one of your treatment, and the hospital transportation of the employee to the mortuary was around 17,218. LSD was around 38,000. TTD, that was not paid because it was a fatality, was zero. And then now the CV. So this is what we calculated cost that, for the dependents that will be getting pension. And as you can look at this guy, it's a male around 35, might have a dependent, might have a wife. So the calculations there of 1.7 million are based on, pensions that will be paid out through to the dependents. And bear in mind, by this time, the child might be around 5 years old or 6 years old. And with 1.7 million, if you look at it, if you stretch it until this child is 18, that would be sufficient to be paid out to the employees and also their dependents have to survive for that if this man was a sole owner. And remember, in our families, sometimes this man might be a breadwinner for over 5 people or more. So the company that paid the premium to us, they paid the premium of about 2 million, and those are the claim cost ultimately. And bear in mind, this is only one claim that was reported. They might have several more claims. Can we go to the next one? Here's another case study. An employee got stuck between landing gear and the car, and obviously they were fixing lifts. A male, again, around the age of 34, experience around 7 years. Occupation, yes, he was a professional. Injury, this was a fatality plus multiple injuries. So which means what happened is the employees were injured on site, had to be taken to hospital, stabilized, given treatment, tried to ensure that they save his life. But unfortunately, even with this one, it led to a fatality. The hospital cost alone costed around 181,000. Medical costs was around 249,000. Other expenses was around 17,000. LSD was around 220,000, and the total CV to the claim was around 1.4 million. So which led to the total cost becoming around 1.9 million. Apologies for that. And with that claim cost, the company was paying us around 1 million. Unfortunately, with this, they're going to lose their rebates, mainly because, it was a fatality. So if you check in majority of these cases that were sent through here, most of the things that could have been done there was about the safety department ensuring and training and supervision that needed to be done in those cases. And the cost to that would be less than what the claim cost, which is around 1.9 million. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And then here's another one. An employee was injured, was entering an excavation and twisted his ankle. Gender, again, male, age around 43. Experience on the job was about 4 months. Occupation, he was a laborer. Injury, there was joint injury, dislocation, sprain to the cartilage. Hospital cost was around 28,000. Medical cost was around 17,000. TTD, because he was off work for some time, it was paid around 12,000. LSW was around 79,000, and the total cost of the total cost of the claim was 67,000. Days off. This might be another factor that we're not looking into. So the minute someone is injured on duty, so imagine a person will be off duty mainly because of the injury that occurred, and he stays off for 98 days. And bear in mind, the company still has to pay the salary at that point, and FEM will be reimbursing the company for around 75% of that. This also made the company to forfeit their rebates for that year. And when you look at the process here, it's because of inadequate training and also shoring and of the excavations. Can we move to the next slide? So One of the other benefits of being with FEM is that after 2 years of joining us, the company will qualify for a merit rebate. So the merit rebate, hence I was explaining and showing you the case studies prior to this, is mainly because that if a company neglects health and safety, there is a downfall on that because they won't be able to qualify for merit rebates with FEM. And also, we're trying, the reason why FEM distributes merit rebates is that we want to ensure that the companies look after the employees and look after the employees' well-being. We reward good and health and safety records for companies. So with FEM, we do have merit rebates. For companies to qualify for that, they have to have claim costs that are under 10%, and which means you qualify to get a rebate of up to 50%. So for example, if a company is paying us 100,000 and the claim costs are under 10%, they will qualify to get up to 50% of the rebate after 2 years of joining us. And therefrom on works on a yearly basis. Payments with FEM are paid by the end of August, but to ensure that you qualify for a rebate, all your assessment needs to be submitted and paid up by the 30th of June. And on the flip side is that once a company has more claims, there is another cost that cost implication to the company. So there is loading that will be imposed to the company, which means the company will be paying more on their premiums according to for workmen's compensation. Can we move to the next slide, please? So for a company to join FEM, we have two processes that we have to follow. So one will be a new registration. A new registration simply means that a company has never been registered with the compensation fund. So they don't have any CF registration numbers and they have never submitted or registered with the compensation fund. So in that case, they'll just have to complete our FEM application forms, and an invoice will be raised by FEM. And once the payment is made, there will be a letter of good standing issued to the company. And for companies that have been with the compensation fund and are interested to move over to FEM, what they need is to submit necessary documents to FEM, which are your application forms, confirmation of your nature of business, FEM to confirm with the CF. We do send confirmation with the compensation fund to check whether the company falls within our class. And then the compensation fund, then after the registration is done, they will send through a final assessment that will be done. And once that assessment is settled, the company then will be registered with FEM. And then payment, obviously, we will issue a return of earnings for FEM. And once that is done, we will issue a letter of good standing. But all this, if anyone is interested, I will leave my details also. You can contact me and I'll send you a detailed message about this. Next slide, please. So here is how our letter of good standing looks like. It will have our FEM logo and then the compensation fund logo and the labor department logo. Our logos are valid. They issued once the assessment is paid. They are accepted in all tenders. And in cases where you have issues where with companies not accepting our letter of good standing, we do have a team of our consultant, myself, and also some of our senior managers. We would go and see the company, and sometimes it's mainly because they might not know of FEM, and most of the time when we go through and see the companies, they end up changing their minds. So our letters can be verified on our website, which is www.fem.co.za, and our letters are valid for 15 months. Can we get to the next slide? So FEM also embraces the online systems, because I know now everyone is moving towards doing everything online. We do have our returns that can be submitted online. Your claims can be lodged online. Letters of good standing can be verified also online. And as I mentioned, the website is www.fem.co.za. Can we move to the next slide, please? So these are mostly commonly asked questions. So how does a company qualify for a rebate? So for a company to qualify for a rebate, as I said, your claim cost should be under less than 10% of your premium. You qualify to get up to 50% of that of the premium that you've been paying. And as the cost increases and the merit pay rebate will also decrease. So that works on a sliding scale. And what is the minimum premium that is needs to be paid to FEM? The minimum premium ranges from around 2,500, and that is when you join FEM from the 1st of March. But if you join us after the 1st of March, it also decreases, we prorata it. It also decreases according to the months and then the time you join FEM. And I know most people would like to ask if, there is any more payments that we need to be made to FEM, but the answer to the question is that no, there's no any additional fees or any charges that an employee will incur. We charge exactly the same rate as the compensation fund does. So these are gazetted by the compensation fund, and we follow all the compensation fund rules and regulations. Next slide, please. So another question that is commonly asked is that what happens when you have a subcontractor and you are the main contractor and that subcontractor doesn't have workman's compensation? So by firstly allowing the subcontractor to be on site without workman's compensation, as the main contractor, you are taking liability for anything that might happen to those employees. So it is deemed as the minute you employ someone and they don't have workman's compensation, you'll be liable for any medical cost. And as we saw with the claims and cases that I showed you, now imagine for an example, someone gets injured there and your claim costs are around 1.7 million. As a main contractor, you will be liable to pay for those medical costs. So what happens if a claim is not reported within seven days to FEM? There is no penalties at the moment, but there has been some changes to the COID Act where there might be some penalties lodged to companies that we can distribute later on the new COID Act when it's published. Can we move to the next slide? So with FEM, whenever there is complaints or someone is breaching unethical issues, there is a tip-off line and also a complaints line that is working 24/7, and this is managed by Deloitte. Can we move to the next slide? So I know some of the contractors might be working cross borders. So according to workman's compensation, if the company is registered in FEM with FEM and they have contracts cross border, all the employees have to be will be compensated if they get injured while they on duty in a foreign country, and all medical bills incurred outside of South Africa will be compensated on acceptance of the claim specified to COID rates and currency exchange rates at the time of submission. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. Am I covered? I know this is one of the most common questions. Am I covered traveling from home to work? Unfortunately, if you are traveling from home to work, that is not considered as workman's compensation, but only in the instances where an employee is moved to a resident where he doesn't normally reside in, and it was with the instruction of the employer that they will stay on site or book them a lodge or while they are going to site. So in cases like that, they would be covered for workman's compensation. And another question, is an individual covered? Is an individual covered should they get injured performing duties other than what they were employed for? So the main purpose of workman's compensation. So we said that it's an injury whilst on duty. Yes, an employee will be covered. For example, let me say some guy is a driver and he is asked to do some painting job to assist because there's some delays and he accidentally falls on a ladder. He will be covered under workman's compensation. The most important thing is that if it was an instruction from an employer. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. With FEM, we adhere to the Popeye Act. All information will be used only for compensation services. We won't relay your information to third parties or sales agents for sales purposes. Can we move to the next slide, please? And that's the end of my presentation.